Hi, this is your coach J.D.P. and you are excellent. You are excellent is all about providing access to mentoring and coaching to underestimated people from under-resourced zip codes so they can find entry, acceptance, belonging, success, growth, and most importantly, permanence in their careers. Today, we're talking to best-selling author Kelli Kombat. Kelli is a passionate diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging executive coach who believes inclusion is innate and a sense of belonging is infinitely essential. Over her career, she's worked at such companies as Ford Motor Company, L'Oreal, and Volvo Cars USA. She's also a TV and radio personality. Currently, she's the CEO of Rich Resources in Coaching Happiness and is the current president of the International Coaching Federation New Jersey Charter Chapter. So please join me in welcoming Kelli Kombat to You Are Excellent. Kelli, welcome.
Yes, welcome indeed. Thank you so much for having me.
Oh, it is a pleasure. You and I have started working over the past couple of months for the International Coaching Federation's New Jersey chapter as board members, and you are the incoming president, or actually not incoming, you are the president of, of the chapter. I was wondering if you could share a little bit about your journey to coaching.
Absolutely. So, as you said, when you opened, I've been in human resources for probably about 20 years of my life, between that and diversity, equity, and inclusion. And I started off in broadcasting, never lost my love for using my voice. So, I've always felt that most people want to be heard. They want to feel loved, they want to feel safe, but they also want to feel like they belong and that they're heard. And I believe that people deserve to be heard. So as a human resources generalist, a lot of what you do is coaching. You're coaching employees, you're coaching executives. So during the pandemic, like a lot of people, we were all at home thinking that it was going to be 2 weeks. And of course, in time, I said, well, what else is there? What else can I do? So I ended up going back to school at the leadership coaching for organizational performance at Rutgers University. And there is where I concentrated on coaching. I wanted to be serious about it. So I moved my business, Rich LLC, over from HR consultation to actually coaching. And my whole life has completely turned upside down ever since then. So it's been amazing.
Well, I'm sure it has been a fantastic journey for you. And we share the Rutgers program in common because
Right.
you graduated, I think, a year or two before I did. So
Yeah,
there's
21.
that. But I want to really get into the book. And thank you so much for the copy of
Sure.
Against All Odds. And these are stories of tenacity, resiliency, and unyielding ambition. Your chapter is really interesting, and I want to get into that. But how did you
Right.
come to be a co-author of this book? I think this story is really fascinating.
Yeah, so manifestation, really. I went to a conference in Las Vegas and the keynote speaker was Lisa Nichols. Now, Lisa Nichols has been an author several times over, best-selling author globally, uh, international works, transformational coach, just really one of the most endearing, unbelievable people I've ever met. And she was the keynote speaker in this grand ballroom. And I remember looking across the room and seeing like hundreds of women and all kinds of folks crying and just moved to tears and emotion from her words. And I said to myself, I need to be a part of her life. And so I really just, I don't know what it was inside of me, but something said, you need to know her. And so I just started going to her workshops, being online. And then a little while later, I was in one particular workshop and they had a call for authors. And they said, now, obviously, we're only looking for so many people. So you may not make it, but if you apply and you tell your story, you just might make it into our book. And so thousands of people applied. And I said, well, I'm not an author, but I've got stories for days. stories of resilience, stories of fortitude. And that's what the book was about. And so I applied and I got in, and my world just completely changed after that.
That's awesome. And in the book, you talk about it's such an impactful experience. You get into core memories that you
Oh,
had.
sure. Yeah.
And one in particular is a theme I think that carries through your book along the lines of resiliency, and that is swimming and the arc that that takes in your life. And I was
Sure.
wondering if you could briefly tell us about that.
Sure. So there was a tragedy that happened in my life at 16 years of age. The name of my chapter is called Immortal Combat. I'm just playing up on my
I
name.
love it. I love it.
My it's it's my married name, and my podcast, Career Combat. So I'm like, oh, let's just keep it going. So Immortal Combat is about that tragedy that occurred at 16 years of age, where I lost my father. And throughout the years, I said, well, what is the main thing? Because I've had lots of tragedy in my life, lots of loss, and stories of resilience. But when it comes to the one thing, that one common denominator of what really changed the trajectory of how I view life as it is, as we know it, it was the loss of my dad. And so I've never forgotten what it's like to know that everything can be perfect one day and literally just tragic the next. So that's what I wanted to really embark upon in my journey of telling that story, is that you don't have tomorrow. Like every single day, you need to tell your people you love them. You need to do the thing. Green means go. Do it by all means. Like Shonda Rhimes says in her book, The Year of Yes, it's all about taking the chances, doing what you need to do. And if you're uncomfortable, then you're doing it right. And so that's the story I wanted to share.
Thank you for that. That's amazing because that all plays into resiliency. And sometimes resiliency is you can tap into it, right? After you cast off, doubt and fear, what's left is you and resiliency. That's the ability to stand
That's
up, but also we can find resiliency in our community, in our loved ones, in our
it.
friends, our neighbors, and that support. How important was that support for you?
It was tremendous. It was tremendous because uh, my brothers, my mother is my closest confidant to this day. Uh, I think that solid family nurturing and surroundings, and I've never forgotten. I know years ago Oprah Winfrey said that you are the company you keep, and that the people who surround you are supposed to uplift you. They're supposed to nurture you. You're supposed to learn from them. And of course, I'm paraphrasing, but those are the things that I learned from a lot of the things that I've read and the podcasts that I've listened to. Uh, and that's why I named the company Resources in Coaching Happiness, because when I say I'm the CEO, I don't say it in the sense of CEO. I say it as coaching, engagement, and optimism, because
Wow.
that's what I do every day. It's coaching, engagement, and optimism. And I'm not talking toxic positivity. I'm talking like real life. What can you do about it? Okay, now that we vented, now that we put it all out there, now what are you going to actually do about it? Because that's where the rubber really hits the road.
Coaching, engagement, optimism.
Mhm.
I may borrow that.
Please steal with pride.
Thanks for
Please.
that, Kelli. But
Sure.
you are, and I've had occasion to work with you now for a few months,
Yeah.
and you are amongst the brightest stars in the constellation of coaches that I know. You talk about, your elementary school and your middle school and your high school experience, and you were just like, um, not your typical student.
No. No. I was very different back then, in that I was scared of my own shadow. I had my 2 or 3 friends, and I'm good. I'm good. I don't need to know anybody else. Very painfully shy. I preferred to be by myself. My grades were abominable. I just didn't get it. I just didn't get it, not for lack of trying. It just, everything came very difficult for me, especially once I hit middle school. Thankfully, I had parents who were supportive, that weren't like, where did you come from? Because we're brilliant. They never made me feel bad about being different. And that's why in the book I talk about the fact that grades aren't everything. I can tell you, being a recruiter at some of the brightest and best companies in the world, it's not everything, I promise you. It's about the logic and the emotional intelligence and cultural intelligence, and being well read, and just being creative, and being self-aware, and being able to regulate your emotions. So many things are equally as important. And let's face it, high school's not forever. Middle school's not forever. So those things ultimately are not going to matter. And so I'm glad that we've evolved over the years, that recruiters and people that are hiring managers, companies are not looking just for the brightest and best because we've got a certain GPA. It's about more than that. It's about your community. How are you changing it? Your entrepreneurship. So many things.
One thing that really resonated with me in the book is you talk about your uniqueness and your journey to celebrate that which you are, your desire not to fit in the box. In my own journey, I have had that and then some, where I didn't quite fit in the crowd, or didn't, or tried, but really didn't. And it was a cultural issue as well, because I didn't, at that time in my high school years, I was not in the United States. I was somewhere else. So trying to fit in and figure out who I was. And then in that environment, much like you, not really excelling, but at some point, something clicked for me.
Yes.
What was that click moment for you?
Oh boy. The click moment was, I used to watch a show on television years ago called A Different World.
Yes.
And A Different World was like my dream place, because the characters, you had Dwayne Wayne, you had Whitley Gilbert and Freddie, and all these people that were in the show. And I remember it was the historically Black college environment, and nobody had ever done a show like that. And I remember watching it going, that's where I want to go. I want to go to Hillman, but there was no Hillman. There was Norfolk State University for me, and that's where I ended up landing. It was my parents' alma mater for undergrad. It was near my grandparents, and that's when it clicked. That's when it clicked. Being surrounded by just so much culture, and learning more about who I was as an individual, as a person who identifies as African American, and just seeing the variety of opportunities, being in the Marching Spartan Legion, and knowing that we had all these people coming to the football games to see us. I was so proud of them. They recently marched in the Rose Bowl. And so I still watch them online on YouTube, and that's when it clicked for me. And that's when the grades, everything changed. Everything changed. Everything went up to the stratosphere. And I remember the first report card I got, I remember my mom almost wanting to like do a parade for me because I went from like this person who was preying on D's in high school, because I did test well. That was I was able to, I had a great vocabulary. I was able to read well and test well. But for some reason, when it came to just regular classes, I never did well. But I think it had to do with the environment. That's when it clicked.
That's awesome, especially when we find our place, right?
Right.
And then all of a sudden, it's kind of like, oh, okay, let me try a little of this. Let me try a little of that. Oh, that's not so bad. And rinse and repeat. And over again, we grow little step by step.
Spot on.
It's pretty awesome. So URXcellent is all about providing access to coaches and mentors for underestimated people from under-resourced zip codes who don't necessarily sit down and have are privy to conversations like the one we're having today. So then, and I was wondering if you could tell us, from those early years through those college years, what are some of the lessons that you learned along the way?
Be you. Be you is number one. authentically you. Don't try to be as Lisa Nichols always says. She always says, "Don't try to be a watered down version of somebody else." And I love that because I've always had that lesson of be you. And I'm a nerd, like nerd in the fact that I have a lot of useless trivia in my head. That's okay. That's me. I love documentaries. That's okay. That's me. I love creating memory journals and mixtapes and all kinds of playlists and things like that. That's great. I'm not trying to be anybody else. So that's number one. And I think the second thing I've always learned is, especially since all the loss in my life, is that don't put it off to the next day. Day you love, whoever it is in your life, whether it's your dog or your partner or whoever it is, say it today. Don't put it off. Don't be, complacent. It's not about a certain kind of job or a certain kind of role, or it's never really about that. It's about passion. Wherever you can find the passion, don't put it off. Just do it. Wherever you can find the joy, the things that are meaningful, like I was just talking about music for me, going to concerts, that's meaningful for me. I'm not very big on having a lot of followers. Like I'm not on really social media at all. I'm on LinkedIn, but that's just who I am, and that's okay. So those are the things that I tend to really cling on to in terms of the lessons.
So nerd, huh?
In that I love me some documentaries. Like it's funny because I have so much useless knowledge in my head about documentaries I've seen about all kinds of things. And it's fun at parties, and it's especially good if you're playing like a game of trivia or things like that, because I do quite well there. Whether it's that or even music from my days of being a radio on-air personality and television. I think that I have a very eclectic sense of taste when it comes to music, and my family calls me like the personal Shazam, the human Shazam, because in like maybe 2 or 3 seconds I can name most songs, and they're like, "How do you do that?" And I'm like, "I just useless."
That's awesome. That we all have our talents. Hey, we all have our talents, right? Another thing that resonated in the book for me is the following saying: success includes grit and talent. Can you tell us a little bit about where that came from and what that means to you?
The grit and talent, the talent is whatever you push into it. So it's the education, the training, the practice. The grit is just that tenacity. One of my favorite words in the world is fortitude. In fact, years ago, I even had a personalized license plate that said fortitude. That's how much I cared about fortitude. And it's that never ending quest for excellence, the way you define it, not anybody else. You're not comparing yourself to others, which they say, I think it was Benjamin Franklin who said that it's the thief of all joy. I don't want to compare myself to anybody except me. I'm in it for what I'm trying to better for this world. My whole goal in life is to be able to impact over 1 million people when it comes to all the things that I do, whether it's the coaching or being a producer on Broadway or whatever it is. I'm trying to impact over 1 million people before my day is done. And so that's what I think is that combination. It's the talent. It's all the hours. Was it? I think it was Kobe Bryant with the 10,000 hours. Whatever it is, all of the people that I looked to in the past, whether it was Michael Jackson or Kobe or Jordan or all of the greats, they put hours and talent into that craft. That's what you need to do. It's the hours, it's the education, it's the practice, it's the tenacity too. Because that's the perfect recipe. If you have those two things, you'll get it.
I remember a story about Kobe back in the last Olympics that he participated in.
Yes.
There were a bunch of the players were going out to the club and whatnot at night, and they're coming back at 5 a.m. and they see him in the lobby going to the gym, and they're like, "What?" He's like, "Yeah, it's 5 o'clock in the morning. Kobe, what are you doing?" And he's like, "Man, you guys are just getting back. Okay, have fun." And then all of a sudden, the United States at that time, but previous to that particular Olympics, were a losing team.
Right.
in the Olympics. And then all of a sudden, one by one, the players kind of like consistently at 5 a.m. would be in the gym rather than coming home from the club. So Kobe had a serious work ethic.
It's a great
And
work ethic and influence.
yeah, absolutely.
What a positive influence in terms of maybe I need to watch those tapes, or maybe I need to do my workout regimen or what have you, and do it again and again and again.
Yeah, and that's I think the hallmark of any leader, right? Is talk the talk, but dude, at some point you got to walk the walk. You have to lead by example.
Spot on.
Yeah, and so as a professional, as a mom, wife, sister, you're doing a lot of different stuff. So how do you keep your sanity?
One day at a time. I protect my peace at all costs. It's something that I ask my clients all the time. What's your life battery? Like we got our little cell phones. Here's my phone, right? We have our phones, and we're
let
all.
me see that case. That
My.
Ooh, that's fancy.
It's my battery is always. Oh, I'm at 85%. I'm at 82. But what's your life battery? And when I'm down, if I'm in the 30s, or if I'm down to 20% in terms of my personal life battery, I do things to recharge. I call my mom. I read. I listen to great music like Stevie Wonder or whatever. I do the things that make me happy. Listening to my daughter, and I call up my son who's now in Detroit. He's graduated from college and now he's on his own. So when I'm really like in those low 20s or whatever in terms of my personal percentage, I do whatever it is, because that's everything. I think if I didn't do those things, I probably wouldn't be as positive as I am, because I'm very cognizant of those things, and I'm cognizant of it with my clients too. I can see it in the way that they're breathing. I can see it in the way that they're nonverbals, all kinds of things. You can hear it in their voice. And that's when we use all those things, those gifts, those tools when we're coaches. We're like, how are you doing today? No, really, how are you doing? Because you can tell by all those things. The evidence isn't there when you're 15%, 10. And you really can't do much when you're that low. It's just like with a cell phone, you're rushing around to find your plug. How are you going to plug in? What are you going to do to raise that level of battery?
Coaching is really about asking the questions that may cause the client to take pause and do what we call the coaching eye roll, the one that goes,
I love the moment when they lean back and they go, huh.
And then comes the eye roll, like not in a sarcastic way, but as in the, oh.
I never thought about that. It's okay. You don't have to have the answers. It's our role as coaches to almost like put up a mirror, to ask you questions that you've never even thought about. And the eye roll, those things, like nobody has ever asked me that. That's great. And if you don't have the answer, maybe it's time to think about it. Maybe it's time to do some reflection and spend some time going inward a bit. It's ultimately not our goal to tell them what to do. That's not coaching.
Yeah,
it's
no,
our
that's not coaching.
role to really have faith that they always had the answers. They just don't know it yet.
Yeah.
And they come through with those questions.
One thing I'd like to know is, we talked about your interest in DEI, a lot of different topics in there. So that being your specialty, is there any one particular type of client that is challenging for you, or one that you really kind of are challenged by?
Ooh, that's a good question. I don't think that there is anyone that I've necessarily been challenged by. I think it's more around watching my own triggers. There's nothing wrong with us having biases. In fact, that's the way our brains are built. So I'm not challenged necessarily, to use that word, by people with their biases, or even if they go a bit further with prejudices. I'm not really challenged by that. In fact, I congratulate people when they seek me out as a coach and they're like, I picked you because you look nothing like me. And I don't surround myself with anybody who's different than I am. And I need to be better. I'm a leader. And if I don't get this right, if I don't improve, I'm going to lose psychological safety. I'm going to lose that sense of belonging with my people. So I always tell them, first of all, let's celebrate and congratulate you on at least seeking me out, because you could have done nothing. You could have done nothing. So I'm not challenged by that. I think I'm challenged by myself. I'm challenged by pushing whatever triggers I have from the past, from anything, down, so that it's that emotional regulation. It's not about stopping the emotion. It's about recognizing that as a coach, it ain't about me. And I always say to myself, it ain't about you, boo. Don't don't focus on you. It's about the client. And so that's what I do. And I think that, to answer your question, that's probably the main challenge that I typically will have. And it doesn't happen often, but when it does happen, that's what I work on. And the last thing I'll say about that, I think the best coaches get coached. And many times, if we're not focusing on what challenges us, it's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when. It's going to happen. We will get triggered. We're going to have challenges. What are you going to do about it? What's your plan? And my plan is to always get coached. My plan is to be on that other side, to see what it feels like to be a client, because that way I can be more authentic and more vulnerable.
For me, you are such a natural coach. And I think that in my interactions with you, I think I may have been coached. Maybe, but you're such a smooth, easy-going person to talk to.
Oh,
And I know that when we talk, your brain is going, because, that's just by nature who you are. And I notice this in you. So it's just awesome. One thing you mentioned earlier in our conversation is the year of yes.
Yes.
And this is, for me, this is my year of, if I think it, just do it.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
So what is the year of yes?
So, as I mentioned earlier, it was a book that inspired me, by Shonda Rhimes, who created Scandal and Grey's Anatomy and so many hits, Bridgerton, you name it. And so I read it a few years ago. And a few years ago, I started with the word of the year. I was inspired by a previous mentor of mine who unfortunately passed away about a year ago now. And her name was Willa Edgerton Chisler. And she inspired me to get involved with creating almost like this mantra or word of the year. She gave me a book about it. And when I read it, I said, oh, that's great. That's like an anthem. That one word, it's not about resolutions. Those don't work. What is that one word that's going to take you throughout your year? And for me, a couple years ago, it was green, based on reading the book, The Year of Yes. And green means go. It could mean cash, but but it means go. It means yes. It means you have a green light to do whatever you want to do, Kelli. Like, make sure that it counts and take risks. Be uncomfortable, and that's okay, because then you're doing it right, as I said earlier. So once I read the book and Willa shared that with me about the word of the year, I said, let me give it some thought. What's going to be meaningful? What's going to be that common denominator for me? And this was a couple of years ago. And I said, I think it's green. The year, because when I hear the word yes, I think green. And so that's what I wanted to show up as: evergreen ideas, take the risk, do the thing. And so that was my year. Like I said, 2 years ago, that was the word. And then last year, the word was all about create. Everything was about create. And it's just funny how things manifest when you have that mantra, when you have that anthem. And you've got to be physical with it. Like, put it in places, put it even on like a sticky on your computer. put it on your phone as a wallpaper, whatever it can be, so that it's always in front of you, so that it links your personal, it links your professional. And so that was the word last year. And it did culminate into the book. It culminated into being a Broadway producer. So create was very big for me last year. And right before the new year, the word I decided on, because I give it a lot of thought, the word this year is celebrate.
Celebrate.
And celebrate is about, yes, celebrate the successes, because that's what naturally comes to most people's minds. It's also about celebrate the wins, celebrate the small stuff, nice weather, the natural things that we see when we take a walk, or when we're sitting outside on our deck, or whatever. And it's also about celebrating my clients and their wins. Finally, as you said earlier, my point about weaving ideas, inclusion, diversity, equity, accessibility, solidarity throughout all the work that I do. I think that celebration is about celebration versus minimization. So when things are different, when people are different, celebrate that, and help to encourage other leaders to celebrate that instead of minimizing it, because nobody wants to feel othered.
Yeah, absolutely. Kelli, this is awesome. And I have my sticky notes here that I have posted all over my monitor, a wall, and drives my
good.
my partner crazy. But the year of yes is basically about manifestation, right? It's about the canceling of doubt, the canceling of fear, the canceling of, gee, how is this going to be received? And I actually had a conversation earlier in the week where I actually had that doubt and fear and how is this going to be received? And I found myself going down this little spiral. And what happened at the end of the spiral is I just said, just do it. And if it is, however it is received, it ain't you, because again, you, with fortitude and guts and grit and talent, you put this thing together and, you did your best, and it's going to be received how it's going to be received.
Right.
And it ain't you. And I did that, and I realized that my fear and doubt were totally unfounded, because that in this particular instance, it was me in a new arena. Oh no, you're actually coaching now.
Fear is good. Fear is good. One thing, as you get to know me better, I'm very big on acronyms. And it's the whole thing with, how do I turn this into an acronym? How do I turn this into a song? The fear is something I lean on a lot. I used to look at it as a bad word, like, ooh, fear, I'm afraid. Because I spent a lot of time as a kid being afraid of everything. I mean, I grew up breaking my arms all the time, falling off of things and falling off trees, and you name it, I was breaking something. And so I was very fearful back then, but now I look at it very differently. I'm afraid of doing this project, or I'm afraid of taking this route, or I'm afraid of starting this contract. Good. Face everything and rise. They are. Face everything and rise. So yeah, let's be fearful, because I know if I'm going to have the fear, on the other side of that is going to be a win.
Yes.
On the other side of it is going to be something amazing. And I just got to get through it. I just have to work through the fear, face everything, and rise. That's what I think about when I think of that word.
Yeah. And for those of you who are watching, just, know that fear typically happens before the success does. Right? It's like when you break through that barrier and you kind of look back, you're like, typically when I have that breakthrough and I look back and I was like, oh, that wasn't so bad.
It wasn't.
It wasn't. And what my mind did was made it a bigger deal than it actually was.
100%.
Anyway, Kelli, one thing I wanted to ask before we end is, how is your swimming going? I was going along that thread that I kind of pulled on, that yarn I pulled on earlier.
Yes, it is a goal, baby steps. I will get there. It's funny that you mentioned that because just yesterday, it's so coincidental. Just yesterday, I was having an early dinner with a friend, and we were talking about it, and they were like, "Yeah, I don't know either. I don't know how to swim either. Let's do it together." And I was like, "Ooh, I never even thought about that. I
Nice.
never thought about maybe having an accountability partner because all these
Mm,
years I've never done it because of, yeah, it's more than fear. That resulted in a tragedy for me, and that
right.
illogically is what I associate with swimming. And so it's more than fear. If it was just about fear, I would have done it decades ago. And so I think this is the year of yes to go back
Okay.
to that phrase. Because now I've got options. I've got other people who are willing to be in the trenches with me, which is everything. That's what coaching is. Having somebody right there alongside you that's going to go on that journey with you. And so more to come. I mean, like I said, we just had this talk yesterday, so we have to plan it out and see when would it be feasible to do it. But that would be amazing to not just be on my own going through something like
Yeah.
that.
See, Kelli, how can people find you on the internets and the socials?
Absolutely. So my website is kellicoach.com, KELLICOACH.com. My email is YES at kellicoach.com. That's KELLICOACH.com.
KLI. Kelli, I just want to say thank you so much for joining me today. What a wonderful conversation. I so appreciate you.
Oh my gosh, I had the best time, J.D.P. You are excellent, pun intended. I had to throw that in there.
I was expecting it.
Because you really are. You're just amazing. You're so easygoing, so brilliant, and you're just making so much impact with us on the board, with ICF New Jersey Charter Chapter, and beyond. So I just say kudos to you, and 2025 onward and upward, right?
Onward and upward. And it's the year of yes and the year of you think it, do it.
That's right.
Guys, this has been an amazing conversation with I know. Before we end, I know. So this is just sort of like your gateway to writing. Is there a book in your future?
Dot,
Maybe.
dot, dot.
Okay.
Maybe another book.
Okay. Guys, we've been talking to author Kelli Kombat, whose book, Against All Odds, you can find on Amazon.
That
The link,
national
the,
bestseller.
an actual bestseller.
Yep.
The
In
link will be in the
categories.
description below. Best-selling author. Guys, this is your coach, J.D.P. And always remember, you are excellent. We'll see you next time.